Well, hey guys, it's been probably over a month since I've been able to work on this truck with any sort of regularity, which is unfortunate. But basically all I've done since we last spoke was I cut the back of the frame off and I figured out my axle position so that I can start laying out my rear suspension. And I've done some bracing on the box. I've got it positioned how it needs to be. Starting to weld in some stuff. I put in this 2-inch square tube and I radiused it on my tube roller, but I'm not happy with how it came out. So I'm going to cut it off and make new bars out of 1.25 inches instead of 2-inch. Get those installed so that I can yard this box out of here and get working on the rear suspension. Well, right now I've got the frame sitting where it will be when it's totally aired out, sitting on the ground. I want to mock up my 4-link bars and the mounts at ride height, so I'm going to raise the frame up about 5 inches. That's about mid-travel of what my airbags will do. I'm going to raise that up, raise up the front, start seeing where all my brackets are going to land. Actually looks like a pretty good position. Well, I really need to clean up the axle now, cut off the shock mounts, the old leaf spring perches, all that garbage that I don't need anymore so that I can have a nice clean surface to weld my new brackets to. I've got behind the axle lower brackets coming Thursday, I think. Thursday or Friday. It's Tuesday today, so if I can get that axle all cleaned up, it'll be ready to go once that stuff gets here. Well guys, I've been playing around with this truck here and there a couple minutes as I've had some free time. I've put the engine and transmission back in, I've pulled the body off, not in that order, took the service body back outside. I've mocked up a triangulated 4-link on the rear, which is what I was originally intending to do, but I don't really like how it's coming out. So I've decided to go with a 3-link. I'm basically going to build a giant A-arm for the upper link. So I've ordered a 2.5-inch Johnny joint, but I have some other parts that I can use to get going on it. So as Van Candy on the Garage Fab channel says, I'm going to keep moving forward. Now I've got my lower bars mocked up and tacked to these axle brackets for my airbags, and I do like how that is set up. So this stuff is tacked in right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and fully weld that. I'm gonna remove all this upper stuff though and start getting ready to build my A-arm. Something like that. But these brackets are made for a 3-inch axle, and I'm 3.5. So I'll have to modify those a little bit, no big deal. And then my frame, I'm just gonna weld on a piece of 2x5 straight across, drop it down for that bag mount, but that'll be a minimal notch in the bed of the truck. Well, my Johnny joint for my upper link should be here today. I've got my pinion angle set correctly. I have these behind the axle airbag mounts tacked on where I want them. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull those lower link bars apart, flip it over, fully weld these, weld the tabs on the front for my lower link bars, flip it back over, and get ready to start welding on these top connections. Whoops. All right. Well, I've got everything finished welded. I got my link bar tabs. I have the airbag brackets welded inside and out. I think everything's looking pretty good, so I'm going to flip the axle over and position it and get ready to start welding in a new cross member for my upper link to mount to. Okay, well, I tell you, it seems like every time I weld something to this axle, it gets heavier. I've cut some steel to extend my frame rails over the top of the axle. I'm not sure exactly where it wants to be yet, so I want to build a cross member behind the axle that my upper bag mounts will mount to, and then also I'll have some shocks coming off of the lower bracket up to the cross member. Something like so. Alright, well, I've got my upper bag mounts all clamped to the cross member and squared up, and I'm thinking that these cutoffs from my frame extensions will make spiffy little gussets, but I'll get this welded up first. Oh, what's that? I picked up this long bed S10 the other day, 1989, which is almost the exact wheelbase for doing a chassis swap, which I'm going to do on my wife's truck. That will give me independent front suspension, power steering, disc brakes, a non-torque tube rear end, and temporarily a fuel-injected V6 with an overdrive automatic. Should make her truck way more drivable, way more comfortable, and reliable. So I'm trying to get this dually into a rolling stage so I can get it off my lift and put this thing on to strip the body off. I was lacking on projects, so that's what's next. Well, I'll tell you, that Miller-Matic 211 makes it look like I know what I'm doing. Then again, welding on a plastic table makes me look like I have no idea what I'm doing. Guys, I've been staring at this for about an hour trying to figure out how to hook up this cross member to the frame. And so I did some beer CAD, which is a term I learned from Half-Ass Customs, and made a template out of cardboard and transferred it to a piece of this rectangle tube. I think I'm going to do something like this with a square block in behind. I'm trying to come up with something that works but doesn't look like it was built by a 6-year-old with metric Legos. I'll probably end up making a plate to cover up all this, and that should function and look halfway decent. But we will see. I think what I need to do is get these frame rails tacked on and start with that. Well, I forgot to hit record, guys, but hoping I get the hang of this YouTube thing soon. Anyways, I've welded this piece of 1.5 inches onto the housing of my Johnny joint. I've got this 1.75 inches now that this will slide into, and I've got some holes drilled for plug welds. I just got to tap that in there and weld her up. Looks good, looks good. now I need to figure out where to punch the hole for the joint bolt. Now, in order for my link bars to all be parallel and the same length, so that my pinion angle doesn't change when it moves through the range of suspension motion, I've got my laser set up. So I'm going to measure the top of the upper bolt. It looks like 3.5. And the top of my bottom bolt looks like 11 even. So I've got 7.5 inches of space center to center. So I need to have that same amount on the bottom or on the front of the bars. It looks like 16 7/8. I need to be 7.5 inches higher. 10 3/8, which is 2 3/4 of an inch down from the front of this cross member. Now that this is cooled down, I'm going to go ahead and assemble it. Maybe some silicone. There we go. Okay, well, I got my Johnny joint assembled. I've got my tabs mocked up. I have it square, and I'm actually 1/8 of an inch from being perfectly parallel between my top and bottom mount, so I'm going to call that good. I'm going to tack this in pretty solid, and then I'm going to weld on the axle perches and start building my wishbone. That 120 wall is strong stuff. Let's try 35 degrees to start. Okay, well, I've been playing around with this for a while off camera, and I've got kind of a rough shape put together here. I finished welding my axle tabs, and so I'm going to bolt this back in and finish up my A-frame, or my A-arm. Now I will put my airbags on. That's not bad at all. Now I just need to do a little more framework on this A-arm, and I've got to come up over the driveline because when it's completely aired out, I have a little clearance issue, but it's not that far off. We got a roller. Well, I've got the bed sitting on here. I've kind of tacked in a little bit of a subframe. I've got a long ways to go, but I've got to call it quits here. I've got 2 lumber orders to fill, which will be next week's video. I pounded out the rear bumper and have it mounted. You can see how much I had to widen the boxes to fit over those tires. 4 inches on each side. I have the body sitting on the frame, and there's very little work I'm going to have to do to make that transmission fit. The removable floor pan I can hump up pretty easy, and it's actually really going together a lot better than I expected. The steering is going to line up pretty well. I've got to get a radiator. There's still a ton left to do, but like I said, I've got to do some stuff that pays the bills. I did visit a buddy of mine who gave me these really cool turn signal lights, so I'm going to be replacing the ones that are on there. And he also gave me a hubcap, which gave me an idea. And I need to get a set of matching hubcaps because I think this looks pretty awesome. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully I can stick with this once I get my lumber done. But I appreciate you guys watching and putting up with all the audio problems. And man, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we will see you guys soon. Gonna mill some lumber, get back on this thing.